You can absolutely conquer whatever it is you choose to confront. In this show, we talk PTG, we listen and believe, we support and empower.
Hey, that's what I always dreamed of, but I was nervous sometimes.
Yeah.
Each time I moved a little closer and a little closer
Yeah.
and a little closer,
Yeah.
and some told me, just take a leap of faith.
There you
Go
go.
ahead, let's jump.
Ready? Let's go. Leap of faith. There you go. Whoa.
Whether you have experienced domestic violence personally or not, someone you know has. Your circle of family, friends, acquaintances, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience domestic violence at some point in their life. Physical abuse is only one of the many forms of domestic violence. Survivors also report experience of verbal, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial, electronic, and so much more. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It can leave you traumatized and devastated, mentally, emotionally, financially. You can find yourself homeless, jobless, helpless. The list can go on. There's blankets of insecurities, triggers, doubts, and other residual effects that become hurdles that impact our life as we do our best to move on. Many people associate butterflies with a sense of freedom. We've been taught along the way to focus on the transformation that takes place inside of the cocoon. I invite you to take a moment to conceptualize all the odds the caterpillar was up against and needed to defeat in order to get to a safe place, to build its cocoon and actually experience the transformation. My name is A. Garcia. I am a mother and survivor of a double attempted homicide. Now, I'm dedicating my life to take yours to the next level by experiencing post-traumatic growth to begin a new chapter in your life. Let's get started on this journey together. Garcia here. Thank you for tuning in to Confronting Domestic Violence, for you cannot conquer what you will not confront. Today, I have a guest speaker by the name of Sparkles, and she is going to share her story and her trial, her journey, her tribulation, what she's doing today, and how she is leveling up her coping skills and her ability to continuously give back. So this show is not intended to ignite any triggers. For her story may touch your life or help save another's. So please welcome Sparkles.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me all the way from the other side of the country. I'm very excited to be on here. Again, like she said, my name is Sparkles. I'm not going to go too much into the depths of my story. Let me just start by saying I have had overlapping abuse for as long as I can remember, in the home, all the way up into my adult relationships. And more recently, I was in a relationship that was very abusive, strangulation, just things that it's not necessary to even get into on here, but just the throwing of the head first and all the trauma and the consequences that we are left with. It's hard. And I struggle every single day I don't leave my house really unless I have to. I have a brain injury because of all of this. I have social anxiety. I don't feel safe outside anywhere, even in my own backyard. These are things we're getting to. At least I'm sleeping through the night. Initially leaving my ex was very difficult. He continued, obviously, like most do, he continued to taunt me, all kinds of questions that we always get. From there, I don't know. I was living down the beach, and my father had made me come home up here to my house in Delaware to the other end of the state. And even from there, made me move in with him for safety reasons. And because the damage that was being done still to my property was just the cost and the amount of money that was put out on tires alone. My story involves being fed crystal meth from day one. So I was at this point still heavy on trying to come off the crystal meth, which is not easy. There's not a lot of science behind it, and it's deadly. So anyway, I came home and I turned to smoking crack because it was the lesser of two evils. And then I got stuck there. I also got in trouble for my domestic violence, which is not uncommon. I think speaking to Agape on a personal level, you realize that the story is not any different. Our journeys are all different. I do believe there's a core which goes into the fears and there's a certain level.
Sorry, I want to take what you just shared and give myself and the listeners like a setting. So you said this was one of your most recent relationships. So this is an adult relationship that you're referring to at the moment. And when you're saying that okay, so how long were you with this individual?
9 months.
Okay, so in 9 months, and you have your own properties. He moved in to your property?
I was staying at my dad's beach house. I had just moved down there to help my daughter and with my grandson so she could finish school or whatever. And
Okay.
My son-in-law could work. And I started dating him. The craziest part was we grew up together. We knew each other. We knew of each other. So the commissioner is talking to me and he starts going through this list. And I was just like, I knew about his son, but I did not know that out of 7 charges, he was found guilty of 6. And the only reason he didn't get the 7th one was because his attorney found a loophole, which would have put him in for the rest of his life.
Okay, so you're with this individual for 9 months. You said earlier that you realize in reflecting in your life that there's just been layers or overlapping layers of exposure to or receiving a form of abuse. First of all, I want to recognize and acknowledge that 9 months is a long time to be in an abusive relationship. And I also want to say that 9 months takes a lot of strength and courage to get out of that, especially to the degree that where, that you're telling us that it was at. So what helped you see the signs and what were like the milestones, and I'm sorry for using that word, but the peak
as you
point
move into it
that you were like, okay, this is severe and this is enough and I'm not going to do this?
If you want me to be honest, let's see, it was August we started seeing each other. August. So 2.5 months. And that should have been the first red sign I noticed. I was like, we were seeing each other. It was this, it was that, it was the other. I begged and pleaded just to go to a haunted house together. Like something so simple. Like that was, it was like pulling teeth. It was a holiday. And then I realized I think I knew he was selling, I didn't know what he was selling, but I knew he was selling drugs. And I had no idea what though. And yeah, some people are like, that should have been enough. Going through life and all those trials and tribulations, all the things I've been through, like what I thought was good was bad. The people I started bringing home were trash and drug addicts and they're criminals and they're jailbirds. But you told me this was unattainable and to lower my standards. So I did. Which
So it was
then
like from one
became the
extreme to
standard.
the other. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then it became the standard.
So was it him that introduced you to the meth? How did you get hooked on the meth?
Yeah, I actually I've had my share of addiction, but it's been a long time. And I have never done meth actually before at all. It was put in my food and it's soluble. So either by the time it's given to you, you can't see it, or when you do see it, it looks like table salt. So why would I question that? And until we got to food where he just wasn't feeding me at all anymore. But hey, there's a lot of nasty stuff that comes with domestic violence out here, guys. And she talked about coping, and my honest to God way of coping turned into DVA. I even did other things.
So
yeah,
explain what DVA is and expand a little bit on what you meant when you said he wasn't feeding you, like almost as if you were in a cage and you were not being fed or nourished properly. So what is DVA?
I can go into some very detailed stuff if you would like me to. Feeding me until he stopped. Like it got to the point where I would ask him, I wasn't allowed to do anything at all. Like I cleaned and got beat. literally. He would make me food, and then he would sit there and he would give me a piece to eat and toss it out of my hand. I'd have to pick it up and feed it to him. And this went on and on. Then there's other circumstances that people don't even stop to think about, like me being locked out of his house while him and his friend sat inside and laughed. And I was outside and couldn't come back in until I passed all of my bodily functions. So I did that. And then I couldn't come in because I had to wipe. And then once I had to wipe with my hand, then once I wiped with my hand, I couldn't come in because I stunk. There's so many depths and levels of domestic violence that people just don't even consider. It's not just the obvious bruise, scratch, oh, she's mental and psychotic because of something that it's not just about that. There are so many demeaning actions that we live through. And it's sad, and I'm sorry to say it, girl, if it's for anything, we at least know we can take a punch. I know it's not a funny subject or topic. I've lived through it. And honestly, I have an uncomfortable giggle. And then there's, even till now, it's been 4.5 years I've been fighting. And I honestly still struggle with missing him at times. It got really bad on New Year's Eve. I've never been to New Year's Eve with anybody. And I got so excited. And when we got dressed, and boy, I looked so hot, and it was just great. And of course, he wouldn't wait till the last minute. And he came up to me about 4 or 5 minutes, 3 minutes before the ball hit. It was getting ready to go down, and he had dropped shrooms. There's nowhere for me to go. I've slept under bridges in water in the middle of winter, trying to do just what everybody said. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. And
So hold on. So let me tie some things together here. So you're on this beach house, or you're staying with him, or he's staying with you, however that's working out. He has complete power and control. You're at this point tricked into becoming an addict on meth because of what he's doing.
that's actually the control piece, because
Okay.
because
And
when he threw me head first the first time, I didn't feel my back break, my hand break, nothing. And I just started scooping it in my face as quick as I could because, well, that's major pain.
so the first beating that you received was to that extent where he broke your
Yeah.
back, your wrist, your shoulders.
Yes. Yeah. And both times in my house. I don't know, like when you grow up with somebody, like, and everybody knows this person, nobody knows anything about all this. He's now on to like his 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th victim now. And there's no consequences, folks. Let's talk about the laws.
Yeah, and we're gonna get there because that's what I wanted to ask you was that, so during this 9-month fight to get out, 2 months after you're in, pretty much, because now you're fighting your emotions. Now you're realizing that you are drugged. Now you're realizing that this is a place where you're mentally and emotionally distraught. You know that he has this power and control. You're trying to figure it out, and you're calling the cops. Yeah, you're
Oh,
going.
numerous times.
And you're going to the hospital, and I don't know what are you sharing your story? Are you telling them what's going on? Are they
I
not
have
believing you because you are on drugs? They like what?
That is for people who aren't completely aware with a lot of the ins and outs of domestic violence. I'm sorry, what was that last one you said? About
Them believing you, or were they looking at you like a drug addict?
I didn't realize who his friends were. I didn't know he was sniffing lines of meth with the police. I didn't realize that he was friends with all the cops. There's a lot of factors that you don't realize. So he is literally listed. So I did call the police. So technically, I am the reporter, but they put him as the victim, and they let all the evidence walk out the door. Never had friends that come in my house. There was blood everywhere. It was all mine. There was holes in the wall from my head. I fell onto like a raw stone floor, not like leveled, nothing. And that first throw was about the first 3 were in the same night, within an hour and a half of each other. One of them I didn't go unconscious. I caught myself coming across the floor, but he broke my tailbone by pulling me off a sofa down at his place. I don't know. Listen, if something in your stomach, and I'm just learning this, doesn't spin right, you got to get out. You have to like believe in, you can only believe in yourself. That's all we have until you get away and you can find stuff like us.
So do you feel like there was like a Stockholm syndrome that you had, that you felt?
Actually, that was mentioned recently that I may have Stockholm syndrome because of the overlapping. I was kidnapped about 11 or 12 years ago by a guy. I was sexually assaulted in between that and this by a world-renowned neurosurgeon. This is all stuff in the newspaper and can be looked up anywhere.
When were you diagnosed with your TBI, and when did you realize that you needed to get out of this situation and that you were 100% done?
I didn't. My dad did.
He saved you. He came to save you.
He made me leave the beach house. Like I went back to the beach house. It was bad because once I stopped doing everything, I was drinking so heavily, so heavily. Like
And did you leave all your friends like behind? Did you just decide to isolate yourself with this guy? Is that one of the first things that people can acknowledge, is when you're isolated and when you're completely not yourself and when you're being treated as if you're less of a person? Like, these are all things that are the flags and telling you this is not right, it's not for you, it's not safe.
I honestly think that's a little bit further in the process.
Okay.
I think sometimes when we get to that stage, we're on that cusp of, can I leave? Should I stay? Can I fix them? Was I at fault? Did I do this wrong? I think that a lot of times there are a lot more red flags than people realize making efforts with. And I just want to make something very aware. There are plenty of areas now where you can report your victimizers, your abusers, as long as they meet certain qualifications. Abuserregistry.com is one of them. That's what we like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love it. And we'll get to what you're doing now in a few. Let's take a walk through what happened after your dad picked you up and how you got your strength back and how you were able to wean yourself off of this addiction of being abused and of the drugs, and how you were able to stabilize yourself and how you coped with your diagnosis of TBI.
Okay, one question at a time. Let's go back.
Sorry.
What was the first question?
Okay, so when your dad picked you up, how did you go through that transition of being completely removed from that environment?
It took a little while because I went back to my place, which isn't far from my father's, and I would sleep during the day because at night I figured if I was awake, then something happened, at least I would see it. And then I wouldn't sleep upstairs because what if he got in? He had keys in my house and nobody would help me change the locks. And so if he came in, I didn't want to be trapped. And then I would sleep at night, or during the day, I would sleep because I figured other people would be awake and they might be able to help me. So it wasn't just as easy as, and honestly, it still isn't. It Yeah, it was bad. It was really scary. That at that point in my life, everything scared me. Everything. I wouldn't leave my house unless I had somebody with me. And then as far as the getting off the addiction and things like that, I got in trouble. Honestly, I got in trouble for the DUIs and things like that. Delaware has laws that you only get it's a 1, 2, 3 law. Yeah, I was looking at 15 years in prison for DUIs because I hit my fifth one. And yeah, so I got an attorney and my dad told me to come here. And honestly, even here, like when he wasn't here initially, like I still sometimes, because of my brain injury, my peripheral sees stuff that's not necessarily there. Not like whole humans and dogs barking, but we see, looks like something like a critter or something might be moving and things. And so you asked, how did I deal with, coming off the addiction? I didn't have a choice. I was clean when I started my DUI court program. I made sure I was. I planned out my last high and everything. I have to talk and think about this stuff. It was horrible.
Because you were the one that was charged with the DV as the victim. You were charged with it because of whatever he told them.
I know, because I got too many DUIs.
Okay, so you were charged with DV because you had too many DUIs. How does one thing have to do with the other if you were
No,
already
no, no.
law
I
enforcement?
wasn't charged with DV. I was basically made out to be a criminal and to be a liar. I was told that I've altered my PFAs. They have never, ever, not once, have they gone and gotten him for any of his violations. He's got numerous of them. I have 100-year PFA, and it states plain and clear on my PFA that I'm a victim of domestic violence.
the hospital diagnosed you with TBI from the domestic violence, correct?
No, that they missed all that.
Many times as your head was pushed into the wall, slammed on the floor, punched, and tossed around. The
I never
hospital,
knew. No, sorry.
was that where the courage came to let go of the drugs?
No, I didn't have a choice in that one. But as far as you had asked, I had, when I got in trouble, I had, it was a drug DUI program. I could have literally, they could have taken and said, you're going to jail. Like if they would sanction you for a day in jail, 24 hours. Like it was ridiculous. So I did get clean. And then I did my community service with an organization that I didn't send it. So I was working on still getting the nonprofit. I became Public Allies, but I was able to use that apprenticeship and different things that I went through. And they weren't easy times. And I learned from a lot of that and how to take it into the community. And I realized as DVA, domestic violence ambassadors, was growing, and we build this as we're going. But as it was growing and we were getting like some of the responses we were getting from the community and people all over the place, we don't want to just do, look, this is a worldwide problem, folks. This isn't just here. We need to all come together in unity and solidarity, and we need to fight this as one. Because to be honest with you, we're still working off of old Roman rulings for domestic violence.
I agree with you, and especially about available resources and things that are available for real-time victims. And what you have shared so far as it relates to your journey with this guy that you're with for 9 months, and look at the devastating life changes and trauma that you went through during those 9 months. And what I focus in on is the moving on. You moved out, and that takes such strength to move out. And then it's that journey of moving on. And you shared how traumatized you were with moving on, that you would stay awake during the nights, that you couldn't sleep during the day, that you were afraid to leave even your own home, that you didn't want to go anywhere by yourself. You needed to have somebody around you. And then at the same time, at some point in all that, you started becoming this fighter and looking at what was done wrong and what should have been done differently, to the point that you are establishing domestic violence ambassador program with other individuals. And that's where the post-traumatic growth that I talk about comes in. And this is a story, a journey that you're taking us through that defines all of that. You have beaten some extreme odds here with constantly being exposed to. Go
That's
ahead.
what I was going to get into, is you had asked about the TBI. I have, so I had to get this military grade spec scan done. And it actually, I imagined it would have been drugs that just showed up. Like that actually is the beginning of that type of stuff, which leads into some of the behaviors. And I did not know, I didn't know anything about, I knew a concussion, they say don't let people sleep, keep them awake, blah, blah. That's the only thing I've ever known. So he tied me to a chair one time for 2 weeks because he had knocked me unconscious at his place down in Sussex County, Delaware again. And this time when I got up, I thought that I had a nosebleed and it was clear. And I was just like the nose, like, why is this clear? And I figured it's clear blood. Found out later it was spinal fluid coming out of my nose. So at this point, yeah. So at this point is when the massive part of, like, when he had tied me in the chair for those 2 weeks, I had no idea what was going on. And I'm not talking about with being tied down. Everything around me just wasn't coming. Nothing was coming together. Like, noises scared me. I was seeing things all of a sudden on top of what I was seeing with the other stuff. But like, something wasn't right. And I couldn't figure out what it was until I had a business meeting with Mid-Atlantic Concussion here in Wilmington, and a phenomenal doctor, Vincent Schaller. We had reached out and we had a business meeting, and we were like telling him, I was like, all of a sudden I was noticing there's something wrong with my memory. Now we're a little while removed from this happening, right? And I started noticing my vision, like every couple of months I'm having to go back in. And that's when he said, Dawn, you have a traumatic brain injury. We need to make you an appointment. And I was like, okay. That's how I found out. And then, of course, there's been other incidences since that have occurred. Are they unrelated? We don't know. I have a swallowing motility that's probably caused from my strangulation, which means that basically I can't swallow. Like, it hurts all the time. You can hear my voice goes in and out a lot. It can kill you, actually. You can stop breathing from it. And yeah, so I have that I'm living with. But let me be honest, the living with the traumatic brain injury that I have right now it's hell. It's a living hell. This has got to be like the worst thing ever, and almost feels like a curse. As you've seen my memory, I can stutter. I have to think things through a little more. My whole life is never going to be the same. I've had 7 new realities in the last year and a half. And each new reality, you have to hope that you can get to a point of making processes that work, and that it stays there, and it really doesn't. Today, I still have to work at making processes that work for me, and I have to think about how I can make it work for other people, which is the hardest part, honestly, because you can't see my injury. And therefore, people think not real and it's a joke, and that I use it because I want to do whatever I want and I want to say and talk. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with when I thought you were a friend and I handed you the paperwork so that you understood what I was going through and willingly chose not to read it. That's where the problem is. I'm not going to walk around and feel bad for what's been done to me. And if you're living anything near what I'm living with, you don't do it either. You shouldn't do it either. But I'll tell you what, use your voice. And then as far as the healing and stuff, I'm going to tell you, I was able to come up with recently one positive thing that came out of my abuse. This is it. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have found my success. Has nothing to do with the person, but it does have to do with the event.
The experience. Yeah. Listening to what you're sharing and what you're doing and how you're continuously leveling up your coping skills and really putting into effect your knowledge, your expertise from your experience, your wisdom. Okay. What you're doing with it, your strength, how you're turning that into helpful things and resources for other people. Those are also huge attributes to post-traumatic growth, the spinal cord, right? That
Yeah.
core is the spinal cord that holds all of your nerve endings, that holds all of your neurological responses and memories and triggers and all of that. Yeah, things around it can fall apart, but ultimately that spinal cord is what's protecting all of that as well. So I see that your spinal cord, although you have injuries, is very well intact. You're using that core and that shell to really make some huge differences in people's lives, and you're going as far as having national events. You're getting your message out there, your voice is being heard, and you're gathering people by the masses. So if you want to share a wounds to wisdom statement and really talk about what you're doing today and where you can be found and how the support that you're looking for to make changes, how that can be supported. And if you want to talk about some gaps in the system, I know we've answered about that in backstage.
We should probably start there, right?
We could definitely have a part 2 to this.
I think we should take that into a part 2.
You know what? Yeah, we should. Let's identify some gaps.
Because
okay,
that's
folks.
one.
Yeah, we'll have a part 2.
That's one I could go on and on about.
Yeah, and me too. You already know. Okay, so we'll have another conversation about that. So back to turning the world purple and DBA.
Well, hold on. You said words of wisdom. My words of wisdom are to find a way to turn your anger, your pain, your vengeance, your rage, and find a way to turn it around and give it back to someone else in a positive way. Because I promise you, it always feels better. Somehow it internally helps us as well. So
straight from Sparkles. That's from Sparkles.
Oh, and together, no one suffers alone. We have to make
That's
sure
right.
we hashtag that.
That's right. That's right. That's on her podcast, you guys.
So I guess to explain a little bit about what you said. So we do have a worldwide event, our third annual coming up, but I'll get to that in a minute. So DVA started. I made a logo. I gave it to a local artist. He made it real. Next thing I knew, the Lions Club were reaching out, and I couldn't be more grateful for the fact that they did, because if not for them, I don't know. I'm not saying it would have never been come to face or come to reality, but I think I needed that. Like it began a journey for me of trusting other women, of realizing that everybody's not my mother, of realizing that it's okay to have relationships with women. Helping people honestly has gotten me through the last 4.5 years. I'm not gonna lie, it's people tell me all the time, you gotta focus on yourself. That's fine, but I'm by myself all the time. Even whether or not I want to be, I'm working, I'm dealing with some traumatic brain injury issues, which has something to do with like having autism and Tourette's sometimes together. You know, you get some kind of weird movements, and just fight. Just when you get to the other side, and if when you're ready, don't think that when you get to the other side, you're gonna be prepared to just step up and put everything out there. A lot of people are not. However, we do supply a platform that if you are interested in sharing your story, we can do that in a way that's anonymous. We can do that in a way that's anonymous by name and by the fact that we can cover your identity. We can also do that for the event we're having. We are working with legislation, not just statewide. I'm in Wilmington, Delaware, and we're working to become national. That's how I met Miss Agape. And so we're going to all start working together. We've got a big surprise coming 2025, but that'll be the fifth one, and you shall see us all again. My other thing is I started volunteering. I started going into the communities. I started going into the communities that raised me because I was on the streets, and I started giving back in those areas. You're not what was done to you. And just always remember that. There is always an opportunity to take your life back. And when you're ready, reach out for help.
That's right. That's right. You can move a million times, but you live in your head when you have reached your breaking point and when it's time for a change for yourself. Absolutely. And if you don't know who you are, or you feel lost and you're not clear on who you are, you surely know who you're not.
And you know what? I can actually respond to that because I still don't know who I am. And to be honest with everybody out there, if it wasn't for a traumatic brain injury rehabilitation center that's available for me in Penn Medicine, things would be a lot different for me. I've had the opportunity to build a team. And by the way, that's also difficult because I've got 35 years of medical abuse from the same people who abused me in my house. So,
but building that community is very helpful and very uplifting, motivational, empowering. Yes, and you're establishing one.
Yeah, it's a feeling you can start to get used to. It might take time, but it's very gratifying. It's very impactful work.
Yeah, it is. It is. Sparkles, thank you so much for sharing your story, for being so vulnerable and open and honest and transparent. All of us have vices and we all cope differently, and we're all navigating on how to level it up. And what you have taken us through is one extreme to the other. And you, like you said, you're still growing, you're still identifying who you are, but you're clear on who you're not. You know what your purpose is, you know who you're influencing, you know who's depending on you to be on your A game. And yeah, fulfilling yourself by helping others is doing something for you. I'm aligned with that 100%. That's where Confronting Domestic Violence came from. And we have a lot of work to do.
Joining across the country. This is how it should be. Yes, we should be working together.
And we do. We have work to do.
Turn the world purple. Listen, I didn't finish it, but real quick, I'm super excited. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Sparkles.
Thank you.
Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code.